Last January, I was watching a friend of mine, she's a full-time creator, and she was just staring at her phone in a total daze.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a few hours, the screen was just a void. No trending sounds, no FYP, nothing.
So the ban had actually happened.
It had happened. The ban everyone had been debating for years had finally arrived, and for a moment, the app went dark. She was just devastated, mourning her business, her community. It was like a digital era had just ended for her.
I can only imagine. That's her livelihood.
Exactly. But then the news broke. The executive order signed on day one of the new administration, and her mood it flipped instantly.
From devastation to what?
Giddy. She was giddy. She started talking about how Oracle and Silver Lake were the saviors, stepping in to make the app safe and American. Mm-hmm. To her, the deal was a total victory, a way to keep the scroll going while finally cutting ties with the, quote, secret sauce of Chinese influence.
It's a striking pivot.
It really was. Just hours earlier, she was terrified of the government's reach. Now she's celebrating this massive corporate takeover.
Because she was convinced the problem was solved.
Completely. She figured, okay, the data lives on Oracle servers, the board is majority American, so the manipulation would just vanish. But as the dust settles on this January 22nd deadline, the reality looks a lot more like a complicated surgery than a clean break.
Mm-hmm.
ByteDance still holds a nearly 20% stake, and that addictive algorithm, it's not being deleted, it's being retrained.
And that leaves us with a really uncomfortable question.
Right. When you rewire the world's most powerful influence machine to suit a new set of owners, are you actually fixing the problem of manipulation, or are you just choosing who gets to hold the remote?
That last point, who holds the remote, that is precisely the mission of this deep dive. We need to move past the emotional and geopolitical drama and really dig into the technical and legal reality of this whole restructuring.
So we're looking at the architecture of the solution.
Exactly. We're analyzing the mechanics of a truly landmark partnership, one that blends this global tech efficiency with these really stringent localized data demands, and how Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI, became the foundational blueprint to make a profound legal mandate an operational reality.
Okay, so let's unpack it. This is a monumental shift. It's where a huge corporate transaction becomes a national security mandate, creating a technical challenge that required, entirely new forms of cloud architecture.
And we have to start with the concrete facts of the deal. The transaction is official. We're talking about the sale of the U.S. unit to a White House-approved consortium.
And it's important to remember, this didn't just happen. This is the end of a long, complex regulatory saga. It goes all the way back to the Supreme Court's ruling that upheld the original divestiture law.
A very long saga. And that closing date, January 22, 2026, that officially marks the end of all that uncertainty.
Let's talk about the money. The valuation was reported at around $14 billion for the U.S. business.
It was. And that number drew a lot of criticism, didn't it?
It did. People looked at the app's global revenue potential and thought, 14 billion?
Yeah.
That feels low.
And, on paper, maybe it does seem low for a platform that literally defines culture and drives global e-commerce. But I think the critics missed a crucial nuance here.
Which is what?
The consortium wasn't buying the full unrestrained global IP. They were buying the right to run the U.S. operations and, critically, control over the national security sensitive components.
That's a huge distinction. So the new entity, the TikTok USDS joint venture LLC, that's essentially a specialized American shell.
A security-focused shell. That's a perfect way to put it. It's built around a global product. I mean, this is an unprecedented exercise in geopolitical engineering.
So the whole structure was designed to satisfy the legal demands for majority American control.
Right, and governance.
Without forcing ByteDance to completely abandon this global success they'd created.
Exactly. And that brings us to the ownership structure itself. It's a masterpiece of division.
So how do they pull it off? How do you get majority American ownership while the original parent company still holds a pretty significant interest? This is where it gets really complex.
It is. So the venture is governed by a new 7-member board, and that board must maintain a majority American composition.
Okay. And on that board, you have the American Investment Consortium.
That's Oracle, Silver Lake, and they're supported by MGX, which is an Emirati-backed investor. Collectively, they hold 45% of the total stake.
So 15% each.
15% each.
Okay, 45% is a strong base, but that's still not 50%. So where does the majority control actually come from? Especially since ByteDance and its affiliates hold the rest of the equity.
The control comes from the governance and board structure, not just the raw equity numbers. And the crucial percentage, the magic number for the Chinese parent, ByteDance, is approximately 19.9%.
19.9, so just under the 20% threshold.
Exactly. That number legally ensures they cannot exercise majority control or undue influence over sensitive operations, as defined by the divestiture law.
Wait a minute, that feels extremely tight. If ByteDance retains 19.9% and then affiliates of existing ByteDance investors hold another 30.1%, you add that up, and that puts the combined Chinese and affiliate stake right at 50%.
Precisely 50%, and this is the critical point that so often gets missed in the headlines. While ByteDance and its financial partners retain significant economic equity, the operational and security control is dictated by the board composition.
And by ring-fencing key functions.
Absolutely.
I see the legal maneuver. But let's be skeptical for a second. If they and their allies hold exactly half the equity, does that 19.9% really mean zero influence? What happens if those affiliates with 30.1% decide to sell to a competitor? Doesn't the sheer economic weight of that 50% stake still translate to some kind of long-term strategic influence?
That is the major structural risk, and it's why the governance structure is so heavily reinforced. So while, yes, the economic influence is still there, ByteDance is limited to just one seat on that 7-member board.
Okay, 1 seat out of 7.
And more importantly, ByteDance is explicitly excluded entirely from the security committee.
And that committee is the real heart of the operation.
It's the operational heart. It's responsible for overseeing all the data handling, the content moderation standards, and the algorithmic re-education we're going to talk about. On top of all that, ByteDance is ineligible to serve as the board chairman.
So the goal wasn't to eliminate their financial interest.
Yeah.
It was to architecturally remove their ability to touch the national security core of the platform.
That's it. It's an exercise in risk mitigation through isolation. Which brings us to the operational split, the actual division of labor between this new joint venture and the global TikTok machine.
What gets isolated? What does the new American majority entity actually get to run?
So the joint venture, the USDS LLC, it focuses exclusively on 3 core national security sensitive operations.
Yeah.
U.S. user data storage, all in-country content moderation policies, and algorithmic integrity. That's it.
And everything else.
Yeah.
The stuff that makes TikTok a global phenomenon.
Everything else. Global product development, the massive e-commerce and advertising divisions, marketing, that all remains under TikTok's existing global U.S. entities.
So it gives the commercial teams the flexibility they need. The commercial engine keeps running globally, but the sensitive functions that could, in theory, be used for influence are legally and technically ring-fenced under American oversight.
It's a profoundly efficient, if incredibly complicated way to manage geopolitical risk.
And this is the profound strategic outcome, right? This structure becomes a kind of foundational blueprint for cross-border tech synergy.
It really is. It answers a core contemporary business question. How do you maintain the scale and efficiency of a global platform in an age where every major nation is demanding localized sovereignty?
And this wasn't just some abstract political thing. It had immediate, real-world consequences for the millions of people who built their livelihoods on the platform.
Absolutely. That regulatory friction leading up to the deal was terrifying for small businesses. I mean, think about someone like Sarah, a small-scale entrepreneur in Ohio who runs a vintage clothing shop.
Right. She relied on TikTok for something like 80% of her sales. For months, she was just paralyzed by the uncertainty, wondering if her primary income source was about to vanish.
That kind of persistent uncertainty is a huge hidden cost of all this geopolitical friction.
It is. And for people like Sarah, the announcement of this partnership wasn't just a corporate headline, it was an economic lifeline. This whole structure is, in a way, a hack to bypass that friction that usually stifles cross-border innovation. It lets her business move past those borders and participate in what you could call a post-scarcity information society,
where reach is virtually unlimited as long as the architecture is secure. The story of Sarah is a great reminder that these technical decisions made in Washington or Beijing, they have immediate economic ripple effects in Ohio.
They found a way to keep the economic flywheel turning while satisfying the security concerns through technical means. But the ultimate security concern, the real secret sauce, was always the recommendation engine itself.
And that takes us straight to the algorithm, the core of the matter.
Okay, so this is where we shift from the legal structure to the technical mechanics. The fear was always the potential for that recommendation engine to be used to subtly influence U.S. public opinion, push narratives, suppress viewpoints, all within a black box. So what happened to the famous hyper-addictive algorithm.
The key realization was that deleting the algorithm was, one, unnecessary, and two, commercially suicidal.
Of course.
So the solution they adopted was much more sophisticated. The algorithm is not being deleted, it is being retrained on US user data only.
Retrained. So they essentially gave the digital brain amnesia, wiped its memory of the original training data, and started feeding it a new, purely domestic diet of information.
That's a great analogy. The theory is if the content feed is optimized using only domestic interaction data, the theoretical risk of any foreign-built manipulation in the recommendation structure is minimized.
So the platform keeps its speed and that addictive quality, but its core optimization function is now localized.
Exactly.
And this is obviously a massive task. It requires a trusted partner, which is where Oracle comes in. What does that technical assurance from Oracle actually entail?
Well, Oracle is designated the trusted security partner, and their responsibility here is immense. They're not just providing servers. They will operate, retrain, and continuously monitor the algorithm to ensure the content is free from improper manipulation or surveillance.
So they're also overseeing all new application development and doing source code review?
They are. They are the permanent, objective auditors of the platform's security and its function.
It sounds like they've positioned themselves as a kind of digital customs agent, checking every piece of data and every line of code that crosses this new national security perimeter. And this must have required a total architectural rethink.
It did. This transition is establishing a truly sovereign data architecture. It's a decisive move towards decentralized yet highly integrated technical stacks. We're literally seeing the birth of what we call sovereign data.
And that's not just a political term.
No, it's a new technical specification for how global platforms have to operate locally.
I want to connect this huge technical shift back to the actual user experience.
Yeah.
You mentioned Leo, the college student, who noticed a subtle change in his feed after the transition.
Yes. So Leo, a digital native in Los Angeles, he noticed his feed started to feel more grounded, more locally relevant, but also quicker. This was around the time the new architecture stabilized. What he was experiencing was his new localized digital home respecting the security boundaries of his country. His interactions weren't just being stored domestically, they were being used to construct a truly localized version of the algorithm.
So it's a model that strikes a balance. It keeps the global connectivity that powers the platform.
But it installs the necessary digital infrastructure to ensure national security.
And this localized algorithmic optimization, this idea of creating a regional version of a global intelligence that's actually driving innovation in AI itself.
It is. It's seen as a pivotal step in accelerating the development of next-gen AI. The technical challenge forces innovation in things like data partitioning and retraining, which, at the end of the day, speeds up data processing for everyone.
Okay, so let's get into the technical engine that powered this whole re-education. Project Texas and OCI.
Project Texas was the code name for this entire undertaking. It was centered on ensuring all sensitive U.S. user data would be housed exclusively on Oracle's high-performance cloud infrastructure, OCI.
And to understand the depth of this shift, we have to consider the perspective of the people who are actually executing it. Tell us about Marcus.
Right. So Marcus is a software architect based in Austin. He spent the final intense weeks of 2024 presiding over what he called the re-education of a digital mind.
Wow.
He wasn't just migrating servers, he was watching as this famous recommendation engine, once a singular, mysterious black box from overseas, was methodically stripped down and retrained on purely domestic data. For him, the geopolitics were secondary to the architectural challenge. He was just focused on localized algorithmic optimization.
And what was the technical result of integrating this stripped-down engine with Oracle's infrastructure?
He described the moment the new neural networks began to click with the OCI infrastructure. The data flow didn't just meet the security requirements, it actually accelerated. They achieved real-time data processing with a precision that was, in his words, unmatched on the prior architecture.
So the strategic integration of that engine within OCI, it's a pivotal shift. It accelerates next-gen AI and real-time data processing.
It does, and it provided the assurance that while the speed and the addictive nature remained, the underlying optimization loops were confined to domestic inputs.
That's the perfect way to connect the legal mandate divestiture to the technical outcome localized optimization. But we keep using this heavy term, sovereignty. If it's more than just data localization, what is the comprehensive model for true cloud sovereignty?
That distinction is so crucial. Data localization is just about where the data lives. That's only one piece of the puzzle. True sovereignty is an integrated model. It's articulated across 4 distinct, equally important pillars. And Oracle's approach recognizes that if you only satisfy 1 or 2, the whole structure remains vulnerable.
So if they're equally weighted, what are the 4 pillars that define complete cloud sovereignty?
They assign an equal 25% weight to each one. First is data residency. This is the physical and geographic control, making sure the data lives on servers within the required jurisdiction, like the OCI servers on U.S. soil for TikTok.
Right, that's the one everyone understands, the most straightforward one to satisfy. What's the next layer?
The second is privacy and access control. This governs who is allowed to see the data. It employs really strict access governance, and crucially, it restricts cloud operator access.
So it's not enough that the data is in the U.S.? Only authorized U.S. personnel and processes can view or manipulate it. Even the OCI engineers running the environment can't just browse the TikTok data.
Exactly. Then the third pillar is security and resiliency. This involves defense in depth, robust supply chain assurances, making sure the hardware and software haven't been compromised, and ensuring the architecture can withstand major geopolitical or regulatory disruptions.
Okay, and the final piece, the one that ties it all back to the original legal mandate.
That's legal and operational controls. This pillar ensures compliance with specific jurisdictional laws, whether it's GDPR in Europe or specific U.S. national security laws. It also mandates that the personnel running the cloud, the actual operations staff, are themselves subject to the correct jurisdiction.
So it moves sovereignty beyond a technical checklist.
It embeds it as a permanent legal and operational requirement.
So if you meet the residency requirement to 25%, but you fail to ensure that only compliant personnel can access the data, so you fail in operational controls, you haven't actually built a sovereign architecture.
Precisely. This holistic view explains why simply migrating to U.S. servers was never going to be enough to satisfy regulators. And that necessity for holistic assurance is why OCI was the strategic choice. They had to prove they could operationalize all 4 pillars at once for a platform as complex as TikTok.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of that. How does OCI actually implement these operational controls, especially the need for localized personnel and that physical separation?
Well, sovereignty demands a lot of flexibility beyond a standard public cloud. OCI offers several sovereignty-capable deployments. One of the key ones is the dedicated region cloud at customer.
Break that down for us. It sounds complicated.
It's actually pretty straightforward in concept. It means physically bringing the full capability of an OCI public cloud region, every service, every security feature, into the customer's own data center.
Oh, wow.
So you get public cloud speed and innovation, but the data never leaves the customer's physical premises. This is essential for sectors like defense or finance, or in this case, for guaranteeing in-country processing for TikTok's sensitive data.
So for the most stringent requirements, OCI can be deployed inside the secure facility. It fulfills that data residency pillar with absolute certainty, and they apply similar controls internationally, like in the EU.
That's the model. The EU sovereign cloud, with regions in places like Frankfurt and Madrid, it goes a step further in satisfying that operational controls pillar. It's physically and cryptographically separated from the commercial OCI cloud. And crucially, that environment is operated exclusively by EU resident personnel.
That is a direct operational response to laws like GDPR and the EU Data Act. By mandating EU resident personnel, you eliminate the legal risk that a foreign government could compel an operator in, say, the U.S., to access data stored in Europe.
It creates a legal air gap. But even with personnel restrictions, there's always the lingering issue of extraterritorial access laws, particularly the U.S. Cloud Act,
which allows U.S. authorities to compel U.S. cloud providers to provide data, even if it's stored overseas. So how does OCI technically mitigate that ultimate legal reach?
This is where it gets really interesting. It all relies on encryption autonomy. This is the key that unlocks true cryptographic sovereignty. The concept is that the customer, in this case, the TikTok USDS joint venture, must retain full exclusive control of the encryption keys outside the cloud provider's operational scope.
So EKMS, the external key management service, that just means they are physically storing the decryption code somewhere. Oracle can't reach it.
Precisely. EKMS lets customers maintain and manage their encryption keys completely separate from OCI's infrastructure. They might even use a third-party hardware security module, an HSM. OCI can then use these keys through tokenized, highly audited operations to decrypt data for processing, but the keys themselves are never stored or cached within OCI.
Okay, let's follow that logic. Let's be skeptical. If the U.S. government issued a Cloud Act order to Oracle demanding access to the TikTok data, could Oracle even comply?
If the data is encrypted using keys that Oracle physically does not possess, keys held by the joint venture in an independent system, then no, Oracle cannot technically comply. They can hand over the encrypted data, but without that customer-controlled key, the data is useless.
That transforms sovereignty from a legal compliance headache into a technical certainty. It's the architectural embodiment of hold your own key. It provides a cryptographic separation.
And it's an assurance built into the system. What's fascinating is that this high level of assurance is not coming at the expense of performance, which was always the conventional wisdom in cloud infrastructure.
Right, let's talk data. We always assume that the more controls, compliance, and security layers you add, the slower, more complex the system gets. Does the data on OCI Sovereign Cloud support that assumption?
The data strongly challenges that idea. While overall performance might be marginally adjusted compared to a purely unregulated commercial cloud, the enhanced governance metrics are just staggering.
How staggering?
When you compare OCI Sovereign Cloud against traditional public clouds on specific governance factors, OCI hits 95% for data control and a remarkable 98% for regulatory compliance.
Those are extremely high scores. It validates the approach. But what about the speed metrics? Does more security mean a slower service?
The analysis shows a strong positive correlation between tight security architecture like autonomous encryption and zero trust configurations and overall system stability. It really disproves that misconception that sovereignty and efficiency are mutually exclusive.
A well-governed architecture tends to be a stable and high-performing one.
Exactly, and you can see that stability reflected in the latency.
Okay.
We saw comparisons showing data latency in these sovereign cloud environments averaging around 20 milliseconds.
And how does that compare to a public cloud?
It's comparatively lower. The average latency in public cloud deployments can be closer to 35 milliseconds.
Wait, so a more strictly controlled environment is demonstrably faster. That's counterintuitive. Why would OCI sovereign regions show better latency?
It just reinforces the operational maturity and stability of OCI's infrastructure in these dedicated regional deployments. They often use localized data processing, which minimizes network risks and those interjurisdictional data hops.
And the latency variance is also narrower.
Much narrower, which suggests greater performance stability and predictability. You know exactly what speed and consistency you're going to get.
So the architecture that was designed for security inadvertently created a system that's also optimized for speed and stability. That explains why the market is moving so rapidly in this direction. How quickly has this focus on sovereignty changed global adoption trends?
The shift has been exponential. Global adoption rates of sovereign cloud models have just soared. They jumped from only about 20% in 2020 to a projected 92% in 2025.
Wow.
This massive adoption curve aligns perfectly with the spread of strict post-GDPR regulations, the global expansion of AI workloads that need localized data, and just increasing geopolitical risk mitigation. Sovereignty isn't a niche compliance item anymore, it's the standard expectation.
And which regions are leading the charge on compliance readiness?
The data confirms Europe is leading the pack, with a compliance readiness factor between 0.97 and 0.99. That's clearly a result of the enforcement of GDPR and the pending EU Data Act.
But the interesting thing is how OCI can scale this model globally.
That's right. We're seeing Asia-Pacific markets rapidly improving their readiness, which shows that this concept of digital sovereignty is now deeply embedded in diverse legal and geopolitical realities all over the world.
So this strategic commitment to architectural separation and cryptographic control has really defined Oracle's identity in a market that's been historically dominated by the big three.
It has given them a strategic beachhead that really no one else possesses at this scale.
Okay, let's set the stage for Oracle's market position. The cloud infrastructure market is, as you said, heavily stratified. AWS, Azure, GCP. They dominate with a massive share. Oracle historically had, what, about a 3% overall market share?
That's right. But the TikTok partnership demonstrated that success isn't always about overall market share. It's about dominating the most strategic, high-assurance niche.
And that niche is cloud sovereignty. How has Oracle leveraged the TikTok deal to accelerate its position within this specific high-value segment?
The growth is staggering when you isolate just the sovereign cloud market. Oracle's share in this niche has surged from only 10% in 2020 to a remarkable 75% in 2025.
75%.
This exponential growth reflects global confidence in their dedicated region deployments and the EU sovereign cloud. They successfully targeted and then cornered the high-assurance compliance market.
And that 75% market share proved their strategy paid off. What are the tangible financial impacts?
The financial results have been really robust. OCI revenues surged 66% year over year in Q3 2025, and analysts are projecting continued strong cloud revenue growth, maybe 15 to 20% through 2027.
And that's not just organic growth.
No, it's driven by their expanding AI capabilities, and critically, the strategic geopolitical alignment that's epitomized by the TikTok deal. They've positioned themselves as the go-to provider for any government or highly regulated entity that needs this level of separation.
So beyond market share, how does OCI strategically stack up against the big three, particularly AWS, on the features that matter most to a regulated client?
Well, we can look at direct comparisons on things like data localization, encryption autonomy, regulatory compliance, and the data shows a really clear strategic differentiation. Oracle outperforms AWS in several key categories that are just non-negotiable for sovereignty. They score significantly higher in both regulatory compliance and data localization.
Because they built their architecture for this complexity from the ground up.
Exactly, whereas competitors often had to adapt existing public cloud structures.
So if compliance is your absolute priority, Oracle offers a technically superior solution. Now, what about the other major competitive lever, cost? How is Oracle positioning itself on price?
Cost is one of Oracle's sharpest tools, especially for attracting enterprise workloads that are often vendor-locked into their existing database infrastructure. OCI is known for its very competitive pricing structure.
They have that always free tier.
A very generous one, yes. But the massive enterprise savings really come from making it extraordinarily cost-effective to run Oracle's own database systems. Cost analyses have shown that OCI can be significantly cheaper than AWS for Oracle DB workloads.
How much cheaper?
In some cases, up to 7 times cheaper when you're running similar high-volume systems. And that is a massive incentive for regulated legacy clients who rely heavily on Oracle databases.
That sounds like a powerful lock-in strategy, though. Offering huge discounts for customers already using Oracle products. Are the savings real for non-Oracle users, too?
That's a fair point. And while, yes, the deepest savings are for Oracle-dependent workloads, the general pricing model is still highly competitive. They also maintain a simple single cost structure across all their global regions.
Which is a subtle but important advantage.
It is. For comparison, AWS GovCloud, their government-certified region, often charges 30% more for that certification layer. OCI offers that security without the added premium across the board.
Okay, so better compliance readiness, strategic cost advantages, and a corner on the sovereignty market. It sounds like the perfect solution for government or highly regulated clients. But every platform has a trade-off. What are the most common criticisms of OCI?
The trade-offs often center on user experience and ecosystem maturity. Common criticisms include the user interface, which a lot of longtime cloud users describe as slow, less intuitive, or just strange to navigate compared to the mature platforms of AWS or Azure.
Yeah.
And customer support services are sometimes described as being inferior compared to the market leaders, where you just have a larger, more established community and extensive documentation for immediate troubleshooting.
That's a huge factor. For a mission-critical operation like the TikTok environment, the reliability of support can easily outweigh a few percentage points of cost savings. So while Oracle won the architectural battle, they still have work to do on the ecosystem front.
They do. Nevertheless, the successful implementation of the TikTok deal really solidifies their position. It reinforces their role as a leader in secure cross-border data solutions and AI infrastructure. This model marrying technical capability with geopolitical necessity positions Oracle as the gold standard for other partnerships involving government, defense, and finance.
Where data trustworthiness is the paramount concern.
It's everything. Sovereignty has truly become their greatest strategic asset.
This deep dive has really shown us that the restructuring of TikTok wasn't a simple corporate transfer. It was a complex geopolitical surgery. It operationalized digital sovereignty by transforming a regulatory crisis into a strategic architectural shift, all driven by the unique cloud capabilities offered by Oracle.
And the synthesis is clear. True cloud sovereignty isn't achieved by political decree or just by moving data. It's achieved by embedding legal compliance, physical security, and cryptographic control directly into the architecture itself. This approach reconciles global innovation, the speed and reach of the world's most powerful social media algorithm with strict national security boundaries. Sovereignty, at its core, is about who controls the keys, who governs the operations, and who ultimately benefits from the responsible and secure use of that data.